The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of Evan Cross's workshop, like 1,000 angry fists. He wiped the grease from his hands onto an already filthy rag and squinted at the ancient freighter engine suspended before him. Another 16-hour day, another handful of credits that barely kept the lights on. The colony world of Ashvale wasn't kind to humans. Most species here had claws, scales, or enough raw strength to snap a man in half. Evan had only his wits, his tools, and a stubborn refusal to quit. He'd built his small mechanic shop from scraps, taking jobs nobody else wanted, the dangerous ones, the impossible ones, the ones that didn't pay enough. Thunder cracked overhead, and through the storm Evan heard something else. Voices, young voices, speaking in the melodic, layered tones of Dravini, the dragonkin language he'd picked up working with haulers. He stepped outside into the downpour and froze. 2 girls stood shivering beneath his workshop's awning. They couldn't have been more than 17 or 18 in human years, though aging was different for dragonkin. Both had the telltale features, small horns curving from their temples, patches of iridescent scales along their arms and necks, and eyes that reflected the dim light like polished gems. One had crimson scales and wild auburn hair. The other bore silver scales and midnight black hair tied in a braid. "Please," the crimson one said in accented galactic common, teeth chattering. "We need shelter, just for tonight." Evan's first instinct was caution. Dragonkin were powerful, proud, and dangerous when threatened. But these 2 looked genuinely desperate, soaked to the bone, their clothes torn, exhaustion written across their faces. "All right," Evan said, surprising himself. "Get inside before you catch something worse than pneumonia." The girls hurried in, dripping water across his concrete floor. Evan grabbed 2 clean shop towels, the closest thing he had to blankets, and tossed them over. "I'm Evan," he said. "Evan Cross." "Eris," said the crimson-scaled girl, managing a smile. "Letha," added the silver one, more reserved. Evan rummaged through his tiny kitchenette, cobbled together in the workshop's corner. He had instant noodles, protein bars, and, if he was lucky, some canned stew from last week. Not exactly royal fare, but it was warm. "Sorry, it's not much," Evan said, heating the stew on a portable burner. "I don't get many guests." Eris laughed, a bright sound that seemed too carefree for someone drenched and desperate. "It's perfect. Better than sleeping in a ditch." Litha elbowed her sister. "Eris, show some grace." "I'm showing plenty of grace. I'm not complaining about the smell." Evan snorted despite himself. "Yeah, well, engine oil and burnt wiring aren't exactly designer fragrances." As they ate, Evan learned they were traveling alone, or so they claimed. They'd gotten separated from their group during the storm and needed a safe place until morning. Something about their story didn't quite add up, but Evan had learned long ago not to pry into dragonkin business. That was a good way to lose fingers. Or a head, so what's a human doing out here? Eris asked, slurping noodles with alarming enthusiasm. "Ashvale isn't exactly known for welcoming your kind." "Needed a fresh start," Evan said simply. "Found one, more or less. I fix things. Turns out things break a lot out here." Letha studied him with those unnerving, reflective eyes. "You're not afraid of us, should I be?" "Most humans are," Evan shrugged. "Most humans haven't spent 5 years elbow-deep in dragonkin tech. You learn pretty quick that claws and scales don't make someone a monster. Actions do," Eris grinned. "I like him." "You like everyone," Letha muttered. The night wore on. Evan gave them his cot, barely big enough for 1 person, let alone 2 dragonkin girls, and settled into his chair with an old jacket as a blanket. The storm raged outside, but inside, the workshop felt almost peaceful. Morning arrived with blinding sunlight and the roar of engines overhead. Evan jolted awake to find his entire workshop surrounded by sleek black armored transports. Soldiers in ceremonial dragon-scale armor stood at attention, plasma rifles gleaming. What in the... The workshop door burst open and a figure stepped through that made Evan's blood run cold. Towering, broad-shouldered, with scales like burnished gold and eyes that burned with ancient power, the dragonkin male radiated authority. His armor bore the crest of the Dravine Empire, the largest, most powerful dominion in 3 sectors, Emperor Kyle Dravine, the Flame King himself. Behind him, Eris and Letha emerged, now dressed in fine traveling clothes, their scales polished and gleaming. They looked regal. "Father," Letha said softly, "this is Evan Cross. He sheltered us last night. The Emperor's gaze fell upon Evan like a physical weight. For a long, terrible moment, silence reigned. Then Kale Dravine laughed, a deep rolling sound that shook the walls. You sheltered the Imperial princesses in a mechanic's shop? The Emperor's eyes gleamed with amusement. Fed them canned stew? And gave them your own bed? Evan's throat had gone completely dry. I didn't know. Clearly. Kyle stepped forward, and despite every instinct screaming at him to run, Evan held his ground. The Emperor studied him for a moment, then smiled. A predator's smile, but not an unkind one. My daughters have been testing potential suitors for months, Kale said. Nobles, warriors, scholars, all failures. Not one treated them with genuine kindness when they appeared vulnerable. He placed a massive hand on Evan's shoulder. You did. Without hesitation, without expectation of reward. I just did what anyone should do, Evan managed, but most don't. Eris stepped forward, mischief dancing in her eyes. Especially not for Dragonkin. Kale's expression grew serious. Evan Cross, the Dravine Empire does not forget kindness. Name your price. Wealth, land, a title? Evan glanced around his cramped, oil-stained workshop. His entire life compressed into one room. Then he looked at Eris and Litha, at their hopeful faces. Just one thing, Evan said slowly. Let me keep fixing things here. It's not much, but it's mine. The Emperor stared at him, then threw back his head and laughed again. A human who refuses an empire's wealth. By the first flame, you are either the wisest or the most foolish man alive. He squeezed Evan's shoulder. Very well. But know this, the Empire protects its friends. Should you ever need aid, you need only call. As the Imperial convoy prepared to leave, Litha paused at the door. Thank you, Evan Cross, truly, Eris winked. We'll be back to visit. Fair warning. And then they were gone, leaving Evan standing alone in his workshop, wondering if the entire thing had been a fever dream, but the pouch of Imperial credit chips on his workbench, enough to buy a new shop 10 times over, proved it was real. Evan smiled, shook his head, and returned to work. He had an engine to fix.